Medium bopper, you may have to sit down. Kevin. Thanks everyone for coming this morning. It's fantastic to look around and see these leaders from Denver and some even from out of town. We're going to do this every quarter. I'll say this every time. Liberty and energy talks, the two things that made the modern world possible. The growth of human liberty, bottom-up social organization, and this explosion in affordable, available energy. We're super lucky, and I am personally deeply thankful for Scott Tinker to make the trip away from a family vacation today to do this. That's friendship as well. Liberty, energy, and friendship. Those are my three favorite things. Scott Tinker, most everyone in this room, I'm sure, knows Scott already. He's a professor at geology at the University of Texas at Austin, did his PhD right here at CU, worked in the industry before going in to head the Bureau of Economic Geology in Texas. He's also the Texas state geologist and has been for 20 plus years. And those are pretty high accolades right there, author of a ton of papers or whatever, but Scott's famous for other things. I knew Scott first originally in his technical role as a geologist. Even then it was a leadership role in geology. But Scott is the Austin not Hollywood, he's an Austin movie mogul. So that is what has made Scott the most famous and maybe the most important for our industry and the broader world. Over 10 years ago, Scott made a movie called Switch, and it's about the energy system and about the energy transition, which is the giant issue that's driving politics, driving social interactions, driving NGO activities this day. Scott made a movie 11 years ago about that. It's been seen by millions of people. He's toured all around the world talking and engaging with that. And what did he do? He followed up 7 years later with Switch On, a movie about my lifelong passion, energy poverty. You know, when you look at the challenges of energy, you can't look at just the United States or Europe who's driving off a cliff. You got to look at the entire world. 8 billion people need energy for better lives. Scott has been a pioneer, a leader in that area. So if you haven't seen both those movies already, I highly recommend them. Last thing I'll say about Scott on the friendship front, we had Roger Pilkey Jr. lined up to be our speaker. He will be, I think, in September. And Scott was going to be one at a later date, but Roger had to cancel at the last minute. And Scott just this was not convenient. This was not on his plan. And this was not easy for his family. But I needed a favor, and he stepped up and did it. And I'm incredibly thankful for that. But I want, last thing I want to end with, our last speaker led off with a tweet from Greta, our leading climate scientist, from 5 years ago today, June 21, 2018, if the world does not immediately get off fossil fuels, climate scientists say the world will end in 5 years. Today is that day. Have that extra piece of bacon. Have that mimosa. This could be our last day, and I'm glad we're here together for that last day. In fact, I'm having a small family and friend party at my house today for the end of the world. There was some worries, should we drink too much on a Wednesday night? And my son-in-law said, if there's not going to be a Thursday, why does it matter? So enjoy today to the fullest, and please help me, friend, energy scholar, incredibly important person in our world, welcome to the stage, Scott Tinker, who's going to enthrall us for the next 45 minutes.
Thank you, buddy. Wow, I think I should just take questions after that intro. Thank you, Chris. That was overly kind, and it's good to be here with you. I lived in Denver for many years, 20 years on and off throughout my life. Our 3 sons were all born here, and then we moved to Texas and had a little girl. So she just graduated from college. That's how long it's been, but it's really always nice to be back in town, and I appreciate the invitation. I didn't know today was the end of the world, so I am going down to Colfax right after this, and I'm not kidding, and I'm going to record the voiceover for Season 3 Energy Switch, our PBS series, in a studio that advertised itself as rap, something else, and voiceover. So I can't wait to put a little voiceover down for PBS with rap going in the studio next door. It'll be good for everybody. So anyway, let's get started with this. It's a few thoughts today here. And, philosophy right off the bat, if mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it, wouldn't that be nice? Just entertain some thoughts. We don't have to agree with everything, but civil dialogue matters so much now. And so I've got some overarching themes for you. You'll notice them as they come by. Energy is vital for human flourishing. We know that. All forms have pros and cons. There's nothing perfect out there in the world, and security drives the decision-making of global leaders. So those are some themes. We'll start with some context. My other favorite philosopher, if the world was perfect, it wouldn't be. We know that. It's not a perfect world out there, and that's the world we live in, however. I got my own axiom. Most people don't know how gasoline's made or electricity even comes from, but they think they do. This is the problem. And they vote, right? They vote loudly with their passion. And Exhibit 1 here, getting on my private jet, the Southwest Airlines, we see a young person with a backpack, people versus fossil fuels. Terrific. And I don't mind the passion. Look, I work with a lot of young people. I love the passion. But put it where your feet are. Walk. Don't fly. It's not flying on batteries. And it never will be if it's hauling a lot of people as well. It's just a density challenge. So I call this energy irony, and you're going to see a lot of it coming by in your life and today. So let's get some global context. Geologists in the room. I know there's at least one, Carter Timble back here. How many other geoscientists in the room? We love ternary diagrams, right? Everything has to sum to 100% on one of these. So energy security, we want it reliable, for sure. In economic, we want it affordable. And we want low emissions out of it. That's clean. That's what clean means to most people today. It's a broader, clean means more than that. But to most people, it means low emissions. So if that's what you want, if you want 100% low emissions, you're going to get zero of everything else on this diagram. Okay. And that's important to think about, is really the trade-offs that exist in so many of these things. Nothing is perfect. I call that the radical middle. We have been talking about that for a long time, that overplay, that interlap in that space. Another way to look at it is energy security, which underpins economic security, and that allows us to invest in the environment. And it flows that way. Okay, energy security, and there's your radical middle. Now, let's take a little romp. For the last 8 years. Pre-Paris, we're talking about the economy a lot. And then Paris pulled us towards emissions, really got us thinking about that, the Paris Climate Accords. Oh, COVID pulled us back to the economy and thinking about that as we shut down the world's economy. And then the IEA came out with its net zero emissions report. Fascinating thing, actually. And then COP26, the one in Glasgow, the Conference of the Parties, the big climate event that happens every year, kind of the Davos of climate, pulled us toward climate security. And then Mr. Putin said, no, come on back. I'm going to weaponize energy. And I'm going to go into Ukraine. So he weaponized it economically and physically. And then COP27, African leaders spoke with one voice at COP27. Oil and gas is going to lift us out of poverty. It did you, and it will us. And then, I love these headlines. South Africa beats climate goal as blackouts slash emissions. I mean, you can't make this up. They can't turn their lights on, refrigerate the food, but let's look at the bright side. They're beating climate goals. I mean, people think this is a positive outcome in some parts of the world. And then we head back now with the German recession, and many of us saw this coming. Chris and I have talked about this for a long time. It's no surprise that Germany has now gone into a recession based on what they do. So here we sit, and let's kind of take our walk through these. Economic security. We started as humans cooking indoors over wood and keeping ourselves warm. The first form of energy is the sun. It grew the food that ran our vehicles, and they pulled their own fuel, right? Solar is not the new energy. It's the oldest form of energy. Wind we used and captured that as well, and the motion of water to mill things, and the motion of water in dams, and then we killed whales to get their oil and make lights. This is old energy. This is kind of pre-industrialization, if you will, over many hundred years. And then coal came along. Dense, Nature densified it, boil water, make steam, turn a turbine, run a generator, make light. That changed the whole world. Now we have liquid energies that follow that, hydrocarbons, we refine them, put in our vehicles, methane comes along, and finally nuclear, which is even denser. And I'm showing you this because this is a really important concept of energy density. Over 1,000 years, we've seen energy just get denser, not a little denser, a lot denser as you go through that time space. It drives modern societies. Dense energy drives our worlds today. We have terms, renewable and thermal for these things, some judgmental ones, clean and dirty. I promise your kids learn the clean stuff and the dirty stuff. You know, you have your own terms, intermittent and reliable, a little judgmental, but we all have our terms for these things. Weather dependent, firm. What we're talking about really is molecules and electrons. Stuff on the left makes electricity. We can burn molecules to make electricity, but we use them to do a lot more than that. Make cement and steel and plastic, ammonia for fertilizers, other kinds of things. We have to have both electrons and molecules. Electrify everything? Not going to happen. We have to have both. So in this world, I've been lucky. I've been in over 60 countries. They're color-coded here by the number of visits, and I've met a lot of people. Making our film switch on, I met this man in Ethiopia, about my age. He had just come out of the bush, had tears in his eyes when he was telling me his kids and grandkids had something he never had. They were in school for the very first time. We keep wandering around into Nepal, and you'll see Sanakanchi in our film switch on quite a bit, cooking indoors with wood like so many other people in the world do, and dying. The Seti Memorial Hospital nearby, kids dying every week of diseases, and moms, pneumonia and cataracts and cancers from breathing indoor particulate matter. 3 million people a year die that way from indoor smoke. That's what COVID killed in 2019, 2020. Okay, 3 million a year. So solvable. Back to Africa and Kenya, in the slum of Kibra outside of Nairobi, we see a school and a church that are doubling, and kids in uniforms walking across mounds of garbage, polluted water, polluted soils, polluted local air. So common in poor countries. Come over here to Vietnam, and we meet Thon, who walks across that bridge every morning to bring her crippled son to school, carries him on her back. We were there, we filmed it, and we witnessed that. Again, that theme of kids in school, from parents just trying to make that happen. India, the most severe, diverse disparity I've seen, from severest poverty I've ever witnessed, really, to some of the most severe wealth. We come back to the Western Hemisphere in Colombia, and the village of Conchuqua, we brought First Solar here. Over 6, 7, 8 days. You can see their array on the left. It's about 3.5 kilowatt, what you'd power half a home with here. Mud huts and thatch roofs with light bulbs in them for the first time, and a refrigerator for some vaccines. These kids will die. Half of them will die before they become adults in today's world from things that won't kill us, like a tooth infection or diarrhea. Okay. The last night with the chief or the mamu, it was a remarkable moment as we turned on the lights and they saw each other in their own village for the first time at night, other than over a fire. So these are the kinds of things we see in today's world, and there are really 3 kinds of people in the world today. Those who are good at math and those who aren't. So which of the 3 are you? Let's do some quick, simple math here. Kilowatt hour usage of a person against my fridge. Okay. So Kenya and Ethiopia, we featured those countries. 9 times more electricity from my refrigerator. How many of you have 2 refrigerators? Don't be shy. How about 3? Keep them up. Okay. So 30 times more electricity in your refrigeration in your home than a human being in many countries in the world today, particularly Africa. I'm not going to talk about ESG other than this moment. What does it mean in the world, to most of the world? Environment, maybe some clean water or clean soil or clean local air that I can breathe. Social, how about a school? Or some, get me out from, into a healthcare facility of some kind. Governance, get me out from under this autocrat so I have a voice, all right? That's what ESG means, and it matters in the world. It's a little different from how we've pulled it here. So when you look at global income in the world, color-coded, the lowest in the yellows and the reds, I'm laying the city livability index on top of that now. There's about 100 cities least livable. See where they are? Where it's poor. Here's the most livable in blue, right on top of where it's rich. Of course it is. And so when you start to think about the emerging economies, what do they need in terms of energy? They're living in energy poverty. It's everywhere, but it's really concentrated in subequatorial regions. They need affordable energy. It's something to get started. And then the developing nations, they've got energy, but it's not reliable to them, okay? So they need affordable energy security and reliable energy. And that's a lot of people in the world. And then finally, the rich world, the developed world, us. We want it climate security, right? We want it clean. And that's not many people in the world if you look at the blue here. Not that many people. What's clean mean? Well, here's a map of clean air. Where's it clean? Where's it's green? Where's it's rich? Where's it dirty? Where it's poor? Over and over, we see these relationships. And I see some in Chris's report, too. Different relationships where it's poor and the things that we don't have compared to rich. It simply can't afford to clean it up. Different priorities in poor countries. So we see these things coming together. Energy security varies so much across the globe. There's not a transition going on. There's all these different circumstances around the world today. 60% of the world live in some level of energy poverty today. 60%, some level of energy poverty. And this is one of the great challenges. I put out a piece not that long ago, World's Road Out of Poverty is paid by energy and plenty of it. And it is. I actually talk about net zero poverty in this piece because that's the most important kind of net zero to me. So it's a paradox. Energy won't end poverty, but we can't end poverty without energy. So it's time to power the people in the world. All the people. It matters to all of us if we do that. So let's talk about secure energy. We've got to strive to be both completely factual and factually complete. I said this to Manchin's first climate hearing a couple of years ago now. There's a big difference between facts and factually complete. Could I get a cup of water? No rush, but thank you. This Denver air is killing me up here. Thank you, Chris. Thanks, appreciate it. Maybe it was the mud pie I ate in the Ship Tavern last night, but no, I really didn't need that. But boy, was it good. Anyway, so by primary energy type, all my slides are color-coded. Coal, gray, green oil, red gas. I grew up in the oil and gas business. Here's the energy in the world. You see coal and oil are still increasing, and you see the COVID dip there. They're dense, but they make CO2 when you burn them. Release it into the atmosphere. Natural gas increasing tremendously. Also dense, nuclear, less CO2. And then hydro is increasing and solar and wind are getting started. They're not dense, but they don't make much CO2. Some of the trade-offs we see depending on what your priorities are. Here's the Great Recession of 2009. You see the dip in energy consumption? Well, here's COVID. I heard many times, it's structural. We'll never consume as much energy in the world. Are you kidding? We're already consuming more than we did in COVID. We consume more coal and oil than everything else in the world today combined, by a lot still. More coal and oil than everything else in the world. No source of energy has gone down globally, not even hay. We haven't reduced anything yet. We're adding more forms of energy in order to meet the demands of the people. Now, it's factual. Solar and wind are the fastest growing. Your kids will learn this in school, and it's true. Remarkable growth, and the costs are coming down at the plant gate. Now, when we scale this to make it factually complete, you see it in the data, but it doesn't look quite so exponential. In fact, they represent about 10% of the growth in energy demand in the last couple decades, of the growth, not the base. We just need so much energy in the world to keep going. Same data color-coded by region. North America, Europe, we've been flat for a few decades and grown our economies. Asia, look on the left side and look on the right for Asia's energy. It's just tremendous growth, and here's the rest of the world. 3 out of every 4 people live in Asia, Latin America, and Africa today, and they're growing faster. 3 out of 4, okay? The demands are going up there, particularly. China, consumption, coal, not power, total energy, This is policy. Here's the rest of China's energy. More coal than everything else combined in China by policy. Why? No COVID-19 dip. Why? The pace continues. If you zoom in, you see 20 gigawatts in a quarter? That's more than one big coal power plant a week being built in China again today. I've had so many people tell me, China's rolled over in coal. No, they haven't. They haven't rolled over in demand yet. And it's affordable and reliable to them. We built on it. Do you know what this is? Let me give you a little bit of a zoom. Now do you know? How about a little closer? Can you see it? Those are bicycles. Okay. Those are piles of bicycles in China. This graveyard illustrates scale and the reality of recycling. Okay. We simply can't fathom what 1 billion looks like today. China versus India. Here's China. I'm going to lay India right on top. There's a little COVID dip in India. India passed China in population in April this year. First time in centuries, China has not been the most populated country in the world. Let's scale India to China for energy consumption. Here we go. A quarter of the energy, same number of people. If you look at the GDP per capita in China versus India, you can see where India wants to head. Mr. Modi has set his sights on this, and I don't blame him. So what's going to happen? Let's slide India to the left a quarter of a century. Watch close. Look familiar? It's right where China was 25 years ago. If it does what China did with coal, it's game over climate. Right? It needs to not do that. But India is building coal passionately today, fueled by coal. Germany did it, we did it, Great Britain did it, China did it. Okay? So the coal consumption in the world looks like this. We've come down, we've cut it in half here. I'm glad we still have some, candidly. But we've cut it in half. There's Asia's coal. And here's the rest of the world. Hardly any. It's a coal story. It's an Asian story. Coal is an Asian story. Pakistan, moving away from gas to coal. Bangladesh, moving away from solar and wind to coal. It's an Asian story, except if you're Germany and Russia cuts off your gas. Then it becomes a German story. 15% increase in coal in Germany. They know it's reliable and affordable to them. Let's lay natural gas right on top of coal, same scale. Look at the difference on the right. Every geopolitical region is increasing its gas consumption. We've gone from 39% gas to coal to 91% gas to coal ratio, and that's still increasing. Gas will pass coal globally in the world, and that's a good thing. It's a global story today. So these resources, nuclear builds, here's the U.S. We built the most. That's how long it took to build each reactor in the 60s and 70s, about 100 of them. Then 3 Mile Island happened, bam, and Jane's film, China syndrome, bam, we stopped. France kept building, and then Chernobyl happened. They had enough, but still Chernobyl happened. And then Korea built, Fukushima Daiichi happened, and China said, whatever, Take away the US and France. Nuclear is an Asian story today. Small modulars could change that. Happy to talk about that during Q&A. Oil production in the U.S. From shale, this is the Bakken, Eagle Ford, the original basins. You can see the COVID dip in demand, and then they've kind of flattened out. West Texas is adding again, still growing, and here's all our conventional oil. So we are growing oil production in the U.S., but it is not in every basin. It is definitely seen peaks in different basins, as you all know better than anyone. In fact, we've gone from 5% oil from shale just in 2007 to over 60% from shale today of our total oil production. Same with gas led. Look at the right side of that curve. It's flattening. Will it stay? How do you maintain it? What's it going to take? 60% from shale. Interesting data here. This is the oil consumption in the world by region. We lead, Asia leads, North America's next. Consumption. Here's the production in those same regions. Take a look. There's only 2 regions in the world that consume a lot more oil than they produce. Asia and Europe. Okay? This is important. And here's the reserves of oil. We grow reserves every year, at least we have. North America with shale, Middle East overwhelms, Latin America more than North America now, reserves. Are we plateauing? Look at Europe and Asia's reserves. None, essentially. They need options to oil. I get it. Options for transportation, particularly to oil. Enter the electric car. Says it on the license plate, electrons. Charging at the electric pump there, being run by diesel. Whatever. You can't make it up. I mean, I know there are places power lines don't go, but we're going to burn diesel to make electricity to charge a battery. Well, it kind of is happening globally in some places. Here's the percent sale of vehicles, global vehicles, EVs. This includes scooters, if you read the fine print. Electric scooters and bicycles and other things. 18% now. Remarkable growth in EVs. Where is that happening? China, Europe, US, and everywhere else in the world. 85% of EVs, Asia and Europe. Who doesn't have oil? Who needs it? And what does China charge with? Coal. You've seen the data. The diesel of the electric world. How much is it helping emissions really? We got to think hard about these things. About 40 million EVs in the world today, total, if you add all that area up. About 40 million out of 1.4 billion. There they are. We're going to have charging stations to power them. How many charging stations? Look, I didn't have any accurate data, so I just made this up. Studies have shown accurate numbers aren't any more useful than the ones you make up. How many studies showed that? 87. All right, so let's make up a number. We're going to electrify half the world's vehicle fleet by 2040. Okay, 700 million vehicles we're going to electrify by 2040. It's going to take 300 million charging stations from a few tens of million, whatever we have today. That's a lot. And you can fit that data right in there. You can see how it's going to happen from 40 to 700 million. Tremendous growth if this is really going to happen. That's only half, and that's a static fleet. We're actually adding vehicles to the world today. Have you seen the inside of a Tesla S? 7,000 batteries. One car. They're bigger than your cell phone, each one of them. 7,000. Let's make the math simple. 700 million times 5,000 is 3.5 trillion new batteries. And they wear out. 3.5 trillion. We use tens of billions today for our gadgets. And they wear out. We've got to replace them. Germans are thinking twice about EVs. They make great combustion engines. Top auto execs are cooling off on the idea of EVs. The affordable electric cars are not viable, the Kia boss said. Ford said its EV units losing billions should be seen as a startup. Italy leader revolt against Europe electric vehicle transition. Not everything in the world is all EV all day. A lot of what we hear is. But the reality is kicking in, and I'm not against EVs, but we got to be thoughtful about this. It turns out, if you look at the metals on the right side of this graph, it takes 700% more for an electric vehicle than a combustion engine. It's in the battery, not the car itself. 700% more. Power generation on a kilogram per megawatt basis is 600% more metals for solar and wind than the dense fuels. It's just physics. It's not judgment here, okay? Major mining is on the way. Unfortunately, a poll of our college graduates' working preferences shows that definitely wouldn't and probably wouldn't go into mining and oil and gas by a lot. And they probably would and definitely would go into healthcare, high tech, and arts. And, okay, I mean, this is energy irony at its finest. We're passionate about solar and wind and batteries. but we will not go into mining. Why would we go into mining? Okay. Well, because you have to mine to get lithium. Here's our lithium production. Here's where it needs to head. And these are unfinanced projects and recycling, which we don't do. And the demand for those 700 million is even more than that. The price is going to get very high and volatile. It already has in lithium and other metals and commodities. Have you seen lithium mining? Is it green? Is mining green? The life cycle impacts matter. As you go from left to right, biofuels grow, process, refine, transport, burn. You're converting carbohydrates to hydrocarbons. Okay, maybe that's a good thing to do. Solar, wind, dams, and batteries. Mine, manufacture, deploy it, move it, dump it in landfills when it wears out because we don't recycle much. The Guardian put out a piece just last week. How solar farms took over the desert and an oasis has become a Dead Sea. They're finally getting it in terms of the land use required. And you know where your turbine blades go. We cut them up and we bury them. That's in Wyoming, just north of here. 100 turbine blades cut into thirds. That's a big earth mover. They're inert, but they're big. Texas has 40,000 turbine blades now, not 100. And we are burying them near Sweetwater, Texas. Is it green? So these are the questions we have to start to ask ourselves. In fact, coal, oil, and gas, and nuclear, all of these things, you're in the business, you know what it takes to make the material, to drill for it, to move it, refine it. We combust it and put it in the atmosphere. We do it cleaner here in the rich world than the poor world, but we got to keep cleaning this up. Okay? All forms of energy have impacts, all of them, at scale. Fossil fuels, solar and wind and batteries. It turns out nothing's renewable. And I said this in a TED Talk to 1,100 students, duck and cover. It was that moment. There's no renewable energy. And their faces. It comes from the earth, we make it, we use it, it wears out, we dump it back in the earth or the atmosphere, we do it again. It's not renewable. We can tell our kids that there's pretty energy and ugly energy. But I don't think we're doing them any favors. Okay. Where does it come from? Different places in the world. These are the top 3 producing countries for oil and gas. U.S. is doing pretty well, but we've seen the data. And here's some of the big important metals. Producing countries. Where is it processed? That's who controls the supply chains. Watch close. It's processed in China. Brilliant. Belt and Roads, other initiatives, bought the processing for the metals, control the supply chains for solar, wind. Who doesn't have natural gas? Who needs options? China and Europe. They control the supply chains. We better get this for security reasons. U.S.-China relations are vital for energy security. Every place I go in the world, they say, they plead, can you guys figure out how to get along with China? It's very important to the world. Yet we're killing America's critical minerals. This last couple weeks ago. We aren't given permits for these either. Okay. Nickel mine in Minnesota. Lithium in Maine. Pick your favorite place. It's not happening. You're going to be mining a lot in Colorado. Going to be opening up those mines to produce all the things we need for solar and wind and batteries. I spoke to a bunch of your regulators not long ago on the Western Slope. Not happening. Okay. Optionality. Little vehicles, electrify them. Scooters, golf carts, small cars, hybrid, electrify cities. As they get bigger, you can't carry the weight, so hydrogen fuel cells again, or CNG, or liquids, and the largest ones, dense energy. The thing I'm going to fly on late this afternoon is going to be liquids, I hope, gasoline, diesel, jet fuels. Yet in Colorado, proud Tesla driver, no oil. No tires, no plastics, no electronics, energy irony. You may as well say I love mining. You're a proud mining state. Maybe you'll open it up again. Number of states proposing EV mandates grows. With all this, we are growing the number of mandates for EVs across the country. Put out a piece in Fortune last fall. Reducing options just doesn't work. Markets hate it. We've got to keep optionality in our energy systems. Natural gas production, similar story. You see it's peaked in the Barnett and Fayetteville. Haynesville has had a revival. Scale those and add the Marcellus and Utica. Shale gas is growing. Here's gas from the oil basins, which is quite a bit, particularly West Texas. And here's conventional gas. So we're still growing our gas production, but again, not in every basin. That's allowed us to take a volatile price gas down tremendously around 2009 by doubling gas production from shale. Remarkable. It saved the Obama administration, got us out of the recession. Trump rode the wave, etc. I took this in Aspen, Colorado. Sit outside, chilly evening, and just warm yourself up and heat the atmosphere directly. Cut out the middleman. Passionate about it in Aspen. No global warming. Right on the propane tank. Energy irony lives. So I went to California. How many of these things are there out there? We're in short sleeves. We don't need these. Does California know it's gas? Propane is gas? I don't know. Don't tell them. Berkeley bans natural gas hookups. Great. They led the wave. New York City is banning. This is over the last couple years. And then some judges stepped in and said, no, that's illegal, thanks to a 75 U.S. law. We'll see how it plays out. Globally, gas, North America leads in gas consumption. Here's the production. Again, there's only 2 places in the world that consume more gas than they produce: Asia and Europe. Natural gas reserves, barely grown with shale here compared to Russia and the Middle East. And then here's the rest of the world's reserves, maybe plateauing. Europe and Asia, not much. They need options to this, right? Who imports LNG? Europe and Asia. Most of it in the world goes there. They got to have options to that. Understand. So the UK and EU have decided to reduce their electricity fuels of coal, gas, and nuclear and grow their solar and wind. By policy, about 1/3 of the generation now is from solar and wind and other fuels. It underpins the mix. And it predates Ukraine by a lot. How's that working? Well, it's 60 cents a kilowatt hour in the summer, last summer. You pay about 10 cents, 12 cents, probably. 500% more. Industries can't afford it. They are leaving. Now, this is at the plant gate. You hear it's cheaper, it's at the plant gate. Levelized cost at the plant gate. Not to you. That takes reliability. That takes backup. And it makes it very expensive. Cracks are emerging in the united front to battle climate change. Macron calls for a green pause. These are all in the last few weeks. The Economist even put out a piece finally. Expensive energy may have killed more Europeans than COVID-19 last winter. And they showed the data. This is important. Climate security or energy? What's really driving decisions of global leaders? Really driving. Energy security is. Climate's in there. The actions and decisions are driven by energy. So when we think about climate, great book. Data must be used to tell the truth, not to call to action, no matter how noble the intentions. Take a read of that. So here's some data. CO2 equivalent emissions have been flat in the rich world for many decades, gone way up in Asia, and just starting in the rest of the world. Bad Asia, right? They emit more CO2 than the rest of the world. Why? Are they just awful? Well, here's why. We ask for it. Above the red line, countries consume more stuff than they produce, and below the line, they can produce more. The United States sits right here. We are a consuming nation. We produce a lot of stuff. We consume more. We make about 5 billion tons of CO2 every year doing that. China makes 10 billion tons, but they produce a lot more stuff than they consume. Most of the non-rich world are producers. Most of the rich world are consumers, us in Europe, the green. We say, send us our stuff on an Amazon truck, One brownie at a time to my front door, whatever. A toothbrush. Oh, cool. Got a toothbrush from Amazon. That's efficient. So we're effectively saying, Asia, make our stuff, And while you're doing it, just release a bunch of CO2 because we want it cheap. Burn coal. We want it cheap. Now, is that a zero emission strategy in the world? Is that going to address climate change? How many atmospheres do we have? One. It's not going to address climate change. This is a shell game. It's the offsets world. I'll buy offsets from you. States, companies, countries. We won't make anything. We'll be green. You make it and send it to us. How far can that go? What really will reduce CO2? It's tough. Technology, the right price, the right scale, the time frame. You got to have all these things. Natural gas and nuclear replacing coal is working. That helps. Hydrogen, geothermal, hydro, some of these are pretty new. Carbon capture, direct air capture, nature solutions, these are all on the horizon. They're expensive. Solar, wind, and batteries, where they work. Efficiency, doing more with less. We waste a lot of energy. Shell demands profit from green energy, not just CO2 cuts. New CEO in town. It's happening. We're seeing it. Optionality is needed. Optionality is needed to reduce emissions. We've got to have lots of, so keep your portfolios broad. So this thing we call a transition, what is it really? It's addition plus emissions reduction. That's the little formula. It's not complicated. We got to do both as we go forward. There are those who believe that this is the transition. We're having a good time with today's energy, but tomorrow energy is right over there, and we're just going to go get it. He's in flip-flops, you know. There's a 50% chance he doesn't land it. What if we don't land it? Probably the one thing we can all agree on in this room, that's an idiot, okay? And that's a stupid thing to do. That's no transition. So let's take a look. I ran this. There's an infinite number of scenarios. This is a 30% solar and wind and other scenario. Coal down, oil starting to go down by 2065, gas way up, nuclear up, everything else up a lot. I take the energy demand that has been historical and roll it over toward mid-century, which is certainly doable and possible. The emissions from that look like this, calculated into the future. Here's today's difference between emissions, and there's that scenario. So we still consume a lot of energy, but lower emissions through substitutions and gas less than coal. But we're not even close to net zero there. You got to capture carbon, direct air capture, and we still won't get close to net zero. Whoever set up this net zero idea. But is that bad? Is reducing emissions that much? That's a pretty good thing. We help. It scares people, though. They see that thick picture and it scares them. A lot of young people think, we're just slamming the door on oil and gas and coal. It's going to go away in a year or two. No, the door's stuck, okay? This is the runner-up of the last photo taken contest, okay? I'm going to show you the winner here in just a second. So here we are. That's that 30%. Same exact data. Let's look at it in percentage terms. Same exact data. There's your energy mix. Look left to right. That's the COVID dip. You can hardly see it in percentage terms. We see coal and oil going down by more than half, natural gas and nuclear more than doubling, solar, wind, and other things going up a lot. Why? Carbon, hydrocarbons, methane, hydrogen, nuclear. It's a density transition. We've been in it for a long time, and we need all these things. The right side of that looks a lot better to me than the left. There's a lot more optionality in it. But you take away the gray and the green and the red, and it doesn't have optionality. It's required for reliable energy. It's needed for secure energy. And a lot of oil and gas in that picture, a tremendous amount. Can you deliver? Can the industry deliver that? Here's the largest producing companies in the world. Look at them. Put the two Russian ones together, they're bigger than Aramco. I got to put all 5 IOCs to get there. How does that make you feel? Secure? Doesn't make me feel secure. Runner up, winner, last photo taken contest. Yeah. If you're going to be stupid, you better be tough. It's a bear for a reason, too. Russia looms large. So let me wrap it up here. This is the map you've seen of income. Let's fade into the world at night. You can see where the lights are on and where they're not on. Here's all the different energy mixes around the world, scaled to be proportional to actual consumption. So now you can see why the lights are on. Got energy. Half the world's energy is in Asia today. Want to get rid of coal and oil? That's what's left. Want to get rid of gas and nuclear? How are we doing? Russia, Africa, Middle East. Some don't even like hydro. Let's get rid of that too. 6%, if you did it fast. Dim the world's lights by 94%. Here we go. How's that look? I mean, realistically, looks like the past. It isn't the future. Turn them on. Got to give lights to more people in the world for hunger, clothing, clean water, shelter, education, and health care. For a couple billion who don't have any. Women, go for the water, cook indoors, get the cataracts, not in the schools. Differentially impacted negatively by energy poverty. Population growth is directly tied to education and energy, immigration and migration away from the autocrats, environmental investment and adapting and mitigating climate. These big issues, you bring them together and they're addressed by secure energy. It drives these global challenges. It underpins the solutions to all of them. So you've seen the themes, hopefully, and my day job is here at the Bureau. Been a real honor working there. Some of you are in our consortia. We do the rigorous science that sits under this. One of my night jobs is this 501c3 we started at Switch On. Grab the TED Talk for your kids and your parents and your family, 17 minutes. Some of these things are in there. And this PBS series we have out now is really cool. 2 guests every episode, high-level people. They don't agree on everything. 25 minutes. We have civil dialogue, more than binary black and white garbage. Real dialogue on some of these big issues. And we're in World Channel. We're 200 million households across the nation with that now. So here's your assignment. Go to switchon.org. You're going to see that big green button and click it. And when you do, you're going to be able to download this presentation, the animated slides. Not all of it, because I change it all the time. It's about a month old. I will update it. Download it, grab some slides you like. My voice is under it, so you can hear it. And go give one talk this year yourself. You've always asked me, what can I do to help? Give one talk this year to 20 people. Okay? A school, a church group, scout troop, civic group. One talk to 20. And send me an email when you do it. I've been getting a lot of emails. That starts to make a difference. Okay? That's how we reach people for real, right where they live and work. So some final musings. No one owns the truth. We just seek it. Okay? Shaming is destructive. Cancel shaming. Enough. Open civil dialogue. End the false competition between energy sources. Everything has roles to play. We need the options. And this challenge isn't simple. It's solvable, though. But we've got to understand it in its real complexity. So, Chris, thanks for inviting me. Thanks for your attention. And I'm happy to address any questions. I think we have about 15 minutes to do so. Thanks. What you got? Yes, sir. Hey, John.
Can you talk about the timeline of nuclear and SMRs, the realistic timeline?
Yeah, I'm pretty close with John Hopkins, who runs NuScale. I've spoken to their board, and Chris Levesque runs TerraPower, which is the Gates underpinned company as well. Those are kind of the 2 leading small modular reactor companies. The patents are there, spending a lot of money to get the regulations approved. Tough in this country still. I think you'll see serial number 1 coming out in probably Eastern Europe for NuScale, Romania or someplace like that, parts of Africa. And I think we'll see it in 5 years or less, maybe a couple years even. They're not, that one's small light water reactors, they're not different technology, NuScale. Sodium reactors, sodium cooled for the TerraPower, a little different, but still very doable. So I think we're going to see that in the world soon. We've already got them on ships, submarines for several decades. So I think it's going to happen. In the U.S., don't know when. Some of the states who are energy leaders are going to have to pioneer it. And I'm talking to a lot of companies, particularly oil and gas companies, would love to have a little 50 megawatt reactor sitting out there cranking away power to run a lot of their facilities with no emissions. So I think we're going to start to see some of these partnerships happening probably sooner than later. The cool thing about this is, I'm looking around the room, some of you are about my vintage, okay? We were trained to be scared of nuclear, right? Under the desk in middle school. Kids today are not trained to be scared of nuclear. They've been trained to be scared of climate. That's their biggest fear. They don't mind nuclear. No emissions, affordable once it's built, dense. All of them that I talk to, bring it. So this is an opportunity, I think, for nuclear to kind of come into its place in the world today. And it needs to. Has to happen for lots of reasons. Safety, kilowatt hour affordable once built, emissions, land, low water, so many positive things out of nuclear. So I think it's going to happen, and I appreciate those who are really pioneering it. The larger ones are being built in China today. They got 40 to 50 under construction today, another 100 on the books. I'm talking about the gigawatt, 100 megawatt scale jobs. Those are big ones. People worry about it a little bit. There's a new nuclear reactor in the Middle East. It's running. So we're seeing this happening. The U.S. better not get left behind on this one. We got to start training engineers again and get going. What else you got? Yes, sir.
Thank you. What an excellent talk. When you are asked questions about the energy transition, I'd be curious how you deal with that in short form.
Addition plus emissions reduction. That's what I usually say. We're adding energy, we're not leaving anything behind, and we're trying to lower our emissions, and it's working. That's the short definition of what transition is. The rest of the talk almost kind of describes why that's happening. But the thought of leaving certain forms of energy behind, coal, oil, natural gas particularly, and jumping to these other things is kind of silly talk. And I don't say that to people. Yeah, actually I do. I say that often, but sometimes stronger words. But we just get them thinking about the demand for energy in the world still growing until population levels off mid-century, around 10 to 11 billion people. And then you'll see different things. It's going to be fascinating, by the way. When China's terrified right now, their population has leveled off. What's going to drive growth? Because growth is good, right? That's what we all learn. Growth is good. If you're not growing, you're dying. What happens when population levels off and starts to roll? Is it bad? Some of the smart economists in the world and other leaders need to really start visionaries, start thinking about what's good when it's not growth. How do we start to define that? I wish I could live long enough to see that and be part of that, because it's coming. And I'm excited about it, actually. Wasn't raised that way. Still have that in my head. I'm a capitalist to the core. Okay, but it's coming. And there'll be good things. We'll define our good in other ways, quality ways, when it's not growth. But that's still a few decades away. When the IEA put out its net zero emissions report a couple years ago, the CEO of Marathon called, said, come talk to my board. I said, when? He goes, tomorrow. I haven't read it. Can you read it? Okay, I'll read it. Put some slides. They took global energy demand down, starting this year. Down. Total global energy demand down to go to net zero emissions. I think Fatih Birol was just showing what it would take to try to do this in one or a few scenarios. COP26, Glasgow, used it as a roadmap. What? How are you going to reduce global energy demand when people are still going up and we're growing our economy? Yeah, we'll get more efficient, but not down. So these are some of the silly things that have happened in our constructs that we're basing policy around. Come on, we got to get a lot more savvy than that. So transition is still addition plus emissions reduction. And look, it doesn't have to be net zero. This is one of those things. If you don't hit net zero, you don't address climate change at all. Yes, you do. It's like running a 4-hour and 10-minute marathon when you wanted to run a 4-hour marathon. Still, you ran a marathon in 4:10. You did a pretty damn good job. You know, if I get net 40, that's pretty good. It helps with global temperatures and other things. It's not perfect, but I didn't kill the world's economy, and I lifted a few billion people out of poverty along the way. That's not bad either. In fact, that's pretty good. So that's those trade-offs, and that's that radical middle sitting in there if you have 5 minutes with them. But if you have an elevator, we're adding energy, dense is good, lower emissions. Yes, sir.
Clean air is a new battleground in Colorado. How is clean air measured, and how should it be measured globally?
Yeah, right now it's through particulate matter at various levels is how they measure air quality, not atmospheric air quality, through various measures of particulate matter. And that's a good measure. PM does. That's the particulates are what get in our lungs and cause cancers and pneumonia and other kinds of things. We can do that globally, and there's some pretty good measurement systems, even in places like Nepal, where we visited. You'll see I'm there with a monitor in a little hut, and this young man from Berkeley, a researcher, has monitored up like 6,000 poor people's homes there. So it's very effective when you can start to measure that and try to substitute particulate matter sources with things like a propane or an induction cooktop or something. So that's very important. Then outside air kills another 2 to 3 million people a year. And then we see that. Remember the brown cloud here in Denver through the years? That's gone down quite a bit. There's still some, but not like it used to be. And you breathe that. But there are a lot of other ways too. What are the sulfur and the nitrogen in the air and the other kinds of real pollutants that we put out from burning things? And coal does a lot of that, not natural gas much. Gas has CO2, but not a lot of the mercury and the SOx, NOx, and other things from burning coal. And oil at some level. Fires, et cetera. So we need to measure it. It is measured pretty well. Measurement systems are getting better, both satellite-based and ground-based. But that air quality is really very important to human health and other health as well. Those are real pollutants that affect our real health. And I think it's vital. Okay. Again, substituting gas for these things, nuclear for some of these things, still dense, still base load, dispatchable. They work. Partnering with other kinds of intermittent or non-dispatchable sources. Yep.
So how do we get this message across to the younger generation that's not seeing these graphs, hearing these talks, and understanding that, and are hearing the opposite?
Yeah, 20 people at a time, okay? I speak to about 20,000 people a year live, times 20, 400,000, that's a pretty good start. And that's just me. TED Talk, the NPR thing, which is in 100 million households, we're actually going to put on, or the PBS, we're going to put on NPR now and Apple and Spotify. It's 25-minute if they can focus through that. We have something called Switch Classroom. I didn't have time to show that, but this is in AP Environmental Science class, which is the most popular AP class in the country. 200,000 students a year take it in high school. We've developed the energy curriculum for that and the platform. At Switch, we've got an advisory council of educators from across the nation, high school and middle school teachers, right in the curriculum. Switch is the energy piece of that. It's free to them online, so we go around the education agencies because it's not the required curriculum. We released it in COVID. I've got 7,000 teachers and 60,000 students used it. We were adding 2,000 a week this spring. Go idle in the summer. It'll kick up in the fall again. So that's free online curriculum, and it's being used outside of AP Environmental Sciences now, so we got to market that. It has everything I'm talking about here with our videos from around the world. We filmed in 17 or 18 countries. Take them right in there. And then here come the little questions and stuff and the exercises. So you You get there, it all happens one-on-one locally, and you build that groundswell. The TED Talk was designed for that. I mean, so many of you asked me over the years, you come up after and say, please come talk to my kids. Talk to your own damn kids, I got kids, and they're grown and gone. I got a grandkid. So that's what the TED Talk, your kids, we're all kids, 17 minutes. It's a good start. It's growing slowly. It didn't go viral because it has oil and gas and coal in it. So it does get kind of suppressed by some things. But we've got 60, 70,000 views of that already, and it's starting to grow. Gave it last year. Just one at a time. And you might hate the talk and say you won't ever do it again. You might actually say, that wasn't bad. I'm going to add a few slides, and I'll give it again, and then again. And this begins to happen. And I promise you, if you are not in those rooms, somebody else is. And I can tell you who they are. They're the ones giving the messaging that you're describing, what they're hearing. You gotta go. We gotta dial it in, step up, and go start to do this. You think it doesn't matter? It matters. I promise you this matters, this local engagement. So give that one talk. Slides are all there. Pick the ones you like, modify them. I don't care. The references are all there for the data sources, etc. So, yes, sir.
Does Europe have a real solution to their energy crisis right now? And if so, is Russia playing into that?
Yeah, does Europe have a resolution? One last thing before I do that. We have something called the International Case Competition, which is on energy poverty. It's in universities around the world. If you're interested, we've got about 200 volunteer mentors and judges, a mentor for each team from 30 nations around the world. It happens in the fall. Doesn't take that much of your time. You get to work with a team of 4 students. They're remarkable kids, from a lot of them living in energy poverty. So just send a note, and we'll hook you right up with the guys who run that case competition. That's another way to start to get there. Does Europe have an energy crisis? Did you say? Was it a question? Rhetorical. Yes, they do. Does Russia play into it? Yes. Russia has. Does Russia play into the resolution? Potentially. We'll see how it goes. Eastern Europe and Western Europe are sort of different now, and you're seeing those differences come out. Eastern Europe saying, give us some reliable, affordable energy. And Southern and Northern Europe are starting to differentiate. Italy, Spain, Greece are starting to differentiate from Germany, Scandinavia, the UK in some ways. So I don't know if I don't want to see the EU bifurcate, because it's a powerful ally and good friends, right? But they are starting to recognize that it's their own policies that have brought them to this position, not just Ukraine. And that the cost of these things isn't just policy. We have a great episode on the EU I'm doing voiceover on this afternoon that will be released this fall on the PBS show. It's a 2-part episode, really meaty. And they talk about it, and I didn't agree with them on everything either, and these are the smart thinkers. They go into it. A lot of the cost is taxation to pay for social programs, but not all of it. And they got to begin to recognize that. And then the reliability, affordability piece, they are losing industries. They are losing people and companies to other parts of the world. And it's hard to bring them back. So how does Russia play into the solution? Obviously, Russia has gas. I think Russia's got some challenges of its own going on right now. I don't think it anticipated the length of the Ukraine war and resistance to it, and the outcome unknown. Russia is proud, been there many times, and so kind of getting back into some kind of accord with Europe would be difficult. I don't know that Europe is going to get into an accord with Russia on gas. They're trying to find the optionality. They think they got it in solar and wind. You know what Europe thinks is going to be their backup for solar and wind to make it reliable, in addition to chemical batteries? You know what they're banking on? Hydrogen. Hydrogen. They think they are going to be able to invent their way into hydrogen at scale in a year or two. And You know, I was shaking my head as these experts were telling me this. I like the thought of a hydrogen economy, but boy, that H2 is a tricky little molecule to keep track of. You know, the lightest on the periodic table, and happens to just be pretty flammable, unlike other things. We will see some industrial accidents. So banking on hydrogen instead of methane, I mean, CH4, H2, CH4, come on, you know, capture a little of the CO2. They're going to get there, I think. Unfortunately, it takes a lot of pain, and last year was a very mild winter in Europe. This year may not be. I don't wish pain, but if it's not, a lot of, you know, you saw the Economist article, more deaths than COVID. COVID had come way down, but that's not trivial. So there's a lot playing out there. I don't know what Russia's going to do. We've moved all of our LNG exports mostly to Europe, our allies, and that means others who had contracts don't. How long can the U.S. continue to increase our LNG exporting? You saw the shale gas numbers. Are we going to build pipelines? Are we going to build the infrastructure we need? Are we going to start putting investments into the oil and gas sector again? Or are we going to demonize it? The U.S. has a choice there. We've only produced about 5% of the methane out of those shale gas basins, 5%. There's more to be had. Another 5 would be pretty remarkable. I took those maps out for time's sake, but we've done the studies. There's a lot that goes into that very, very good question, and it's unknowable at this point. But I do think that Russia needs something, its economy, and it sells energy. Europe needs some things, and so maybe there'll be some gas accords, Nord Stream a little bit, we'll see, but not nearly at the level that it was. I think, and I lectured in Paris earlier this year, Oslo this year. I'm going to London in a month, 2 months. So I go there. I ask them all the time, why not nuclear? What is the challenge with nuclear here? And there's this just guttural post-World War II issue with nuclear in Europe. I think that's changing. Young people may drive it. So I think we're starting to see some cracks in the nuclear resistance in Europe, which is a good thing. Europe could build some nuclear power plants, different sizes, and would be very fundamental to their optionality from coal particularly and gas. But when you're willing to burn coal and not gas, it's not about climate, okay?
We'll end on that note because I think a good bit of it is not about climate. But first, join me in thanking Scott for making this trip and this fabulous talk.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. Please come up to Scott. You can ask extra questions there as well. The next Liberty and Energy talk will likely be September. We'll likely have Roger Pilkey, who we're supposed to have had this time. Keep throwing in suggestions for who we should get because they're going to happen every quarter. Thanks so much to everyone for getting up early, coming here, and spending your morning with us. Appreciate it. Take care and celebrate the end of the world in case there's not a tomorrow.